Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to help you cut through the noise, using the sources you provide to get right to the heart of complex topics.
That's right.
And today, we're doing a deep dive specifically for you, looking at the BICSI DCDC exam. This is really aimed at you if you've started studying, maybe hit a bit of a wall, or you feel ready to move past just the basics and build some real confidence.
Absolutely. Because at this stage, it's less about just memorizing facts and much more about your strategy.
Okay.
We're going to dig into some smart study techniques, understand the psychology behind the exam itself, break down those tricky scenario questions,
Yeah, this can be tough.
and really nail down time management. These are the kinds of strategies, that pros use, the ones that help you aim for passing on that first try.
Okay, let's unpack that then. So the journey today, we're talking about a mindset shift, right?
Sure. Yeah.
How to really use that dense BICSI manual effectively.
Getting into scenario-based thinking and then like a solid game plan for exam day itself. Sound good?
Sounds great. Let's dive in. What's really interesting here, I think, is recognizing that as you get deeper into the DCDC stuff, your whole approach kind of needs to evolve. It's just not enough anymore to know the information. You have to start thinking about it differently.
That's the key thing, isn't it? That shift you mentioned. If you're at this intermediate point, you've got to consciously move from studying, like a student trying to pass a test,
Right.
to analyzing like a data center design consultant would.
Precisely. And that means going beyond just, recalling definitions from a book. It's about wrestling with technical trade-offs, really thinking about what a client needs and understanding the practical side, the operational realities that actually drive design choices in a real data center.
Okay, give me an example. How does that consultant mindset change how you look at, say, power? That's a huge part of the DCDC. Great question. So instead of just like memorizing the list of UPS types, double conversion, line interactive, standby, all that.
Yeah, the list.
You start asking, okay, why would I actually recommend a double conversion UPS in this specific situation? What makes it better or maybe even worse than, say, a flywheel UPS for what this client needs?
Right.
You're weighing things like efficiency, cost, the level of protection, maybe the local grid conditions. You're making a design choice.
Got it. So it's not just what is this thing, but, okay, when and why would I use it? And what are the pros and cons compared to the other options?
Exactly that. And this way of thinking, this analytical approach, it applies right across the board, all the core areas in the manual.
Yeah.
Power, cooling, security, fire protection, cabling, pathways. You treat each one not just as like a chapter to memorize, but as a design challenge, a problem space.
It's a total reframe. You're looking at it as, here's a potential problem. How would I solve it given certain constraints?
Yes. And if you think about the big picture, the exam isn't really testing if you can be a walking textbook.
Right.
It's assessing your potential to make solid design decisions, often under pressure, just like you'd have to for a real client.
Okay, so understanding that mindset shift is step one, thinking like a consultant. How do you then, apply that thinking when you're using your main tool, the BICSI manual? Because let's be honest, reading that beast cover to cover like a novel probably isn't the best way anymore.
No, probably not the most effective use of your time at this stage. You need to be strategic with the manual.
Okay.
One really good technique the sources point out is always start by skimming the learning objectives for each chapter first. That immediately gives you the blueprint, right? It tells you exactly what BICSI thinks is important for you to get out of that section. Sets your focus.
That's smart. Yeah, sets the focus. And I really like this next tip from the sources, turning the section headings into questions. So if the heading is, say, raised floor systems, you don't just passively read the description. You actively ask yourself, okay, why and when would I actually recommend raised flooring? What are the main pros and cons compared to, I don't know, a slab floor?
Exactly. It completely changes how you read. You're actively hunting for answers to design-type questions.
Yeah.
And don't underestimate the power of drawing stuff out.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, sketching diagrams, even if they're super rough, airflow paths, maybe fire suppression zones, cabling routes. It helps lock in that spatial understanding, how things actually fit together. It does something that just reading words on a page often can't.
Totally agree. Visualizing it, even simply, makes a huge difference. Okay, and then finally, once you feel like you've kind of got a grip on a chapter, try summarizing it in your own words.
Yes. Can you boil it down to, say, maybe 10 key bullet points? If you struggle with that, it's probably a sign you need to go back, reread, and clarify things for yourself.
Right. It's a self-check.
It is. And, this raises the question, why are these active techniques so much better than just passive reading? Well, it's because the DCDC exam, fundamentally, it tests your grasp of how all these systems interact, how they function together in a data center, not just whether you can spit back isolated definitions.
So you need to read for the structure, the relationships, the dependencies between things.
That's the core idea, reading for structure.
Okay, speaking of interaction and function, let's move on to something many people find, well, pretty challenging. Scenario-based thinking.
Oh, yes.
The DCDC exam has 100 multiple-choice questions, but a good chunk of them aren't just simple recall. They throw a situation at you, a scenario.
That's right. You're basically dropped into a situation. Sometimes it's a bit vague. Other times it's packed with specific details. And you have to analyze it, make a judgment call, maybe recommend a design, or spot a potential problem based only on what they've given you.
Okay, let's use that specific example from the sources. You've got a client, they're building a data center, it's in a coastal area, and the power grid there is known to be unstable. So, okay, as the consultant, how do you even start thinking about the power needs here? What's the first thing that jumps out?
Yeah, well, first off, coastal area immediately makes me think environmental risks.
Yeah.
Humidity, maybe salt air corrosion, potentially storms causing surges or outages.
Right, risk factors.
And unstable grid power that just screams, we need robust power conditioning and definitely backup even before a full outage happens. So I'm thinking, okay, how bad is this instability? Is it frequent brownouts? Needing maybe double conversion UPS just to clean the power before it even hits the IT gear? Or is it more about frequent but short blackouts? In which case, the duration of the backup becomes really critical. How long do the batteries or flywheel need to last?
Right. And then you have to weigh that against what the client actually needs for uptime, don't you? Are they aiming for tier 2, tier 3, maybe even tier 4? That completely changes the redundancy level you need to design for.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's always the budget.
Yeah.
The classic constraint.
Always the budget.
So this single scenario forces you to juggle multiple things at once.
Right.
The environmental risks, the reliability of the main power feed, the client-specific uptime goals, and that age-old trade-off between how much they can spend versus how resilient the system needs to be.
This is where, as you said, real-world experience helps, or simulating that experience through practice.
Absolutely critical, yeah. And if you don't have years of design experience under your belt, how do you build that analytical muscle?
Yeah.
Well, the sources mention several good training methods. One is practicing active case analysis. Right after you finish reading a chapter, don't just close the book. Pause. Create your own little mini case based on what you just learned. Ask yourself, okay, if a client needed X, but they had constraint Y, what would I recommend based on this chapter?
Oh, I like that. It forces you to apply it immediately.
It does. And here's another tip. Use the BICSI Manual glossary. Really pay attention to it.
The glossary, why?
Because the precise definitions of terms used there often pop up as like crucial clues or keywords within the exam scenario questions. The specific wording matters.
Good tip. Subtle clues. And I guess talking these scenarios through with other people must be helpful too, like study groups.
Oh, hugely valuable at this stage. Even just having one study partner. Discussing different ways to approach a scenario, hearing their perspective. It helps you refine your own thinking. It exposes blind spots you might have. It's about kind of verbalizing your design process out loud.
Makes sense. So this whole section is really about connecting the dots, right? Seeing how different systems influence each other and making smart design decisions based on the specific context they give you, not just recalling isolated facts.
You've got it. That's the essence of scenario thinking. And once you start getting comfortable applying the content like that, well, then mastering the exam strategy itself becomes just as important for doing well on test day.
It really is. Knowing the material gets you so far, but strategy helps you perform when the clock's ticking and the pressure's on. Let's break down some techniques. First up, time blocking. You've got 150 minutes, 100 questions. That averages out to, what, 90 seconds per question?
Roughly, yeah.
You absolutely have to get a feel for that rhythm. And the best way, really the only way, is by taking full-length mock exams under timed conditions. Simulate the real thing.
Couldn't agree more. Second strategy, question triage.
Okay, what's that?
When you start the actual exam, go through it and answer all the questions you know immediately or the ones you can figure out pretty quickly.
The easy ones first.
Right. For anything tricky, anything you're unsure about or that looks like it'll take longer to puzzle out, just flag it. Mark it and move on. get through the rest of the exam, bank those points, and then circle back to the flight questions with whatever time you have left. You'll have fresh eyes, too.
That's smart. Avoid getting stuck, right? Burning like 5 minutes on one tough question early on can totally wreck your pacing and your confidence.
Exactly. It throws you off.
Yeah.
And speaking of confidence, managing your mindset during the exam is key.
Mm-hmm.
When you inevitably hit a really tough question, one that stumps you, take a breath. Seriously, just pause.
Right.
Remind yourself of the bigger picture. The pass rate for the DCDC is usually around 70%.
Right.
That means you can potentially miss up to 30 questions, 30, and still pass. So one difficult question, it's just 1 point. It's not going to make or break your entire exam attempt. Don't let it psych you out.
That's a great perspective. Keep it in proportion. And finally, mock exams. You mentioned taking them for timing.
Yes, but they're not just for timing practice. Take at least 2 full-length ones before your test day. But the critical part is how you review them afterwards, especially the ones you got wrong.
Don't just look at the right answer.
No. Don't just note the correct choice and move on. You need to dig deeper. Ask yourself why your first thought process was wrong. Did you misunderstand a core concept? Did you misread a key detail in the scenario? Or maybe you just second-guessed yourself. This deep review is where you really sharpen your instincts for similar questions on the actual exam.
It's about fixing the underlying logic, not just memorizing the right answer for that specific question, honing that decision-making process under pressure.
Which, again, is exactly what a consultant does. So let's wrap things up by talking about that final week before the exam and the game plan for test day itself.
Okay, the home stretch.
Right. In those last 7 days, the focus really needs to shift away from trying to cram in tons of new information. It's all about consolidation now, reinforcing what you've already learned.
Yeah, makes sense. So what should you actually do in that final week?
Good question. Activities should include things like reviewing all those chapter summaries you hopefully made along the way. Maybe revisiting the 2 or 3 topic areas you felt weakest on during your practice. Taking one last full-length mock exam could be good, just to keep that timing rhythm fresh.
Okay.
But honestly, crucially, prioritize sleep. Stay hydrated. Try to relax mentally. Your brain needs to be rested and sharp, not fried from last-minute cramming.
So true. Okay, then test day arrives. Any tips for the actual day?
Absolutely. Try to remove as many potential stressors as possible.
Yeah.
Get to the Pearson VUE testing center early. Don't be rushing.
Good call.
Make absolutely sure you have your valid ID and your confirmation email handy. And use the scheduled breaks they give you. Even if you feel like you're on a roll, step away from the screen for those few minutes. Stretch, clear your head, maybe grab some water. It helps reset you.
Solid advice. And during the test itself?
Read every single question slowly and carefully. Don't skim, especially on those scenario questions where details matter. And ultimately, trust the preparation you've put in. Your instincts, honed through all that strategic study and practice, are probably pretty good by now. You know, BICSI exams have a reputation for being fair, but they are definitely detailed. They require careful reading. But if you've done the work, if you've focused on understanding the why behind the concepts and how they apply, you'll likely recognize the underlying logic in the questions, even if the wording seems a bit tricky at first.
And that pretty much wraps up our deep dive into this intermediate guide for tackling the DCSC certification. We've covered quite a bit. That crucial mindset shift from student to consultant, strategic ways to actually use the BICSI manual, not just read it, the power of practicing those scenario questions.
Yeah, critical.
And finally, some solid strategies for managing the exam day itself.
And it's worth remembering, as the sources really emphasize, the DCDC isn't just, another certificate to hang on the wall.
Right.
It's really a gateway. It signals a move into a higher level of technical expertise, focusing on these complex mission-critical systems, infrastructure design, the kind of reliability that modern business absolutely depends on.
So keep pushing, keep refining your approach. If you're at this stage, you're well on your way. You've definitely got this.
Absolutely. And maybe as you continue preparing, here's something to think about. Mastering all these concepts, it isn't just about passing an exam. It's really about training yourself to design smarter solutions, to stay sharp in a field that changes incredibly fast, and ultimately to be someone who actively contributes to building the reliable, resilient data infrastructure that, well, basically powers the modern world.